Thank you. Thank you all for coming out to our program tonight. My name is Brad Harriman. I'm the chairman of the board for Wolfeboro Community Television. This is the first year for Wolfeboro's Candidates Night to be hosted by Wolfeboro Community Television. If you represent a local business who would like to underwrite some programming on Wolfeboro Community TV with special acknowledgments of gratitude broadcast with the programming, please speak with Mr. Goodwin, our executive director. So we'd like to thank all the candidates who responded to our request to participate in tonight's program. So I want to thank you, candidates, for coming out and giving the voters this opportunity to get to know you, and thank you for your willingness to serve our community in the office for which you're seeking this election. And now it's my honor to introduce to you our moderator, Attorney Randy Walker. Attorney Walker has been moderator for this program for over 2 decades now. So I'd like to thank you for your service to our community, and thank you for being our moderator again tonight. So I'll now turn this over to Attorney Walker.
Thanks, Brad. So again, this is being sponsored this evening by the Wolfeboro Community TV. It's the first time that they've done it. Traditionally, it's been done by the chamber, and I see Mary is here, and she's probably liking being on the other side of the microphone tonight back there. But thank you for doing it for all those years. And Tim Goodwin, thanks for putting this all together. He did a lot of legwork to make this happen and try to corral all these candidates. Every candidate that was running, whether they were opposed or unopposed, was invited to participate tonight, which is a little unusual because normally only the contested races are asked to participate. And we have had a number of people that said that they would graciously step aside to let the contested races have more discussion because their victory was already assured. So let me introduce you to the candidates. And as I call your name, if you just raise your hand, we have Linda Murray, Dave Senegal, and Jody Person, who are running for Selectman. There are 2 positions that are available, 3 people running for those positions. We then have Suzanne Ryan, and then Jody is also running for the Zoning Board, and Audrey Klein is not here tonight. Those 2 of those people will be elected for those 3.
Zoning Board.
Zoning Board, thank you. And again, we have 3 people running for 2 slots. And then for the Planning Board, we have Roger Murray, Peter Goodwin, Steve Pecci, and Stephen Webster is also running. He's not here tonight. 2 spots are open for those. And then for Library Trustee, we have Brody down in front here is running unopposed. Well, he and Linda Wilberton is not here, are both running for vote for 2, so their victory is assured. Steve Wood running unopposed for Police Commission. And then on the Budget Committee, we have 4 people running for 3 positions, John McDonald, Brian Black, Paul O'Brien, Steve Johnson. And then for various school board positions, we have Tom Bickford, who's running for the 3-year at-large position. He is unopposed. We have Mary Schilleriff running for the member-at-large 1-year position. Christopher Baca is running against her. He is not here this evening. And then we'll round it out with Charlene Seibel from Wolfeboro as our representative. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with how the school district works, there's 9 people on the school board, 6 towns in the district: Brookfield, Effingham, New Durham, Tuftonboro, Ospey, and Wolfeboro all elect 1 person. And then there's 3 at-large positions, and 2 of those at-large positions are up for election this year. Members of the public were invited to submit some questions, and we will try to get those in as best we can. If we have time at the end, which is rare, I would invite you to submit some questions and we'll get them in. But the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to let the candidates introduce themselves to the community, tell you what they're passionate about, what their thought process is, what their philosophies are. And I'd like to thank all the candidates for your interest and desire to serve. For those of you that are already serving, thank you for your service in the past. And but to the extent that you're not successful in this election, there's always next year, and there's always committees and other things that you can do. So we again thank you for your offer to serve. This event is being televised. And we're on from 6:30 to 8. And to the extent that anybody needs to say anything, if you'd grab one of the microphones, that would be greatly appreciated For those of you that have cell phones, this would be a great time to take them out, make sure they're off. And then for a format tonight, it's really simple. The one we followed in the past is basically 5 roles. Each candidate will make introductory remarks for a minute or two, introduce themselves, what their ideas are. 2, this is not a debate. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to have a civil, neighborly, collegial exchange of ideas with a hope that you'll be able to determine some differences between the candidates, and those ones that resonate with you, presumably you'll vote for those candidates. But the goal is that we all come in as friends. We all live in Wolfeboro or the immediate area, and that we should leave as friends as well. All questions will be directed to each candidate in a particular group. So if I have a question for one selectman, all the selectmen will be able to answer that. It won't be bulleted to just one person. And if any candidate would like to respond to what another candidate says, just raise your hand and we'll give you an opportunity to respond. And around 7:40, I'll give everybody an opportunity to make a conclusion or just sort of wrap up or summarize what they'd like to say. And if we have about 2 minutes per person, that will not quite give us enough time. So let me jump in and start with introductions. And why don't we start right here with Linda, and we'll go right down this line, and then Brody, and get down that line. So Linda, start us off and tell us why you're running again.
Thank you, Randy. I want to thank Wolfeboro Community Television for hosting this forum and allowing me the opportunity to speak to the voters. I am running for Selectman because I appreciate what Wolfeboro offers its citizens. I understand the community's needs, not just from being a summer visitor for 25 years, a full-time resident for 44 years, and a Selectman for 18 years, but also for being connected to the current different age populations in Wolfeboro. My 3 children live in Wolfeboro after spending years living in other states. They came back to Wolfeboro to raise their families. My grandchildren range in age from 7 to 22 and are involved in many community activities. Very interesting noise. During the week, I bring my younger grandkids to the Abenaki ski area to ski. While I enjoy the new Abenaki ski lodge and have conversations with the young parents, I will work to maintain Wolfeboro's unique characteristics. As a selectman, I'll keep in mind these characteristics when making decisions. First, to preservation of the town's lakes and ponds that have attracted many of us to Wolfeboro and have kept those who were born here from moving. The small town atmosphere, the friendly hello, the slow pace, and the strong feeling of belonging. Volunteerism, which supports our nonprofit organizations and adds to the quality of life. One generation helping another generation, like caregivers, Meals on Wheels, and the dinner bell. These are the characteristics that make Wolfeboro so attractive. I am currently on the Budget Committee, the Economic Development Committee, the Capital Improvement Plan Committee, the Selectmen's Liaison to the Wolfeboro Public Library, the Charette Implementation Committee, the Milfoil Committee, and I chair Wolfeboro Waters and the EDC Last Night Wolfeboro Committee. My approach to addressing a town matter is to listen to all sides of an issue, ask probing questions, and think about the issue before I make a decision. I will bring to the Board of Selectmen 18 years of institutional memory, excellent organizational skills, an understanding of financial statements, a logical thinking process, and a familiarity with current town issues. I believe in community service. I value and will work to preserve Wolfeboro's natural resources. I support a vibrant business community. I know firsthand what it takes to make a living in Wolfeboro. I believe I can effectively solve problems and make sound policy decisions for the town of Wolfeboro. I will bring my unique perspective to the Board of Selectmen because I have connection to a number of generations in town.
Thank you, Linda. Dave, you're up.
Yeah, my name is Dave Senical. I've lived here in Wolfeboro since 1963. I came here originally in the summer of 1950, and I just didn't want to live anywhere else because of the small town feelings that were here. And that's why I'm still here. Again, I've been on the budget committee before I ran for selectman. I was on the budget committee for 27 years. So I have a pretty good idea of how the town works as far as budgeting is concerned. So I'd like to keep going with that commitment to the town. My daughter was raised here. She now lives in Florida. I also have 4 grandchildren, the youngest of which is 18. They do come up here in the summertime. They still like it here. But I'm still interested in what goes on in the community and wish to keep doing that through the Board of Selectmen. The town, as most of you know, has been very supportive of different ideas and different programs that have been set forward within the town. The town has been very good about supporting all of the things that we all like and do here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Jody.
Yeah, my name's Jody Person. I moved here to Wolfeboro about 18 years ago. I've been a business owner for quite a few years in town. I guess I got interested in wanting to get into the town politics and stuff when the restoration project came up for what we're in right now. I sort of went out and was handing flyers out and doing stuff to why it wasn't a good idea to do this. And I guess what really piqued my interest was when I was handing flyers out down at the post office, and someone actually went and called the chief of police, and chief police came down with a cruiser and another officer, and they stood on either side of me. And this isn't the police chief we have today, but they sat on either side of me and just really tried to intimidate me and make me go away. And that's what really piqued my interest and got me excited about paying more attention about things going on in the town, money being spent. I'm friends with some of the richest people in town, and I'm friends with some of the poorest in town. And I can look at the richest people and talk the same conversation as I can sit with the poorest person and talk the same conversation. And they both live in this town, and I think it's really sloped one way. It's been, the direction of Wolfeboro is really, in the last, 15 years, has just accelerated in the wrong direction. So that's some of the reasons why I'm running for selectman in the ZBA.
All right, thank you. This has taken a little longer than I thought, so when we get on to the next group, if you all could shorten it up just a little bit. So that was the selectman part. But Suzanne, we'll start with you in the ZBA, and then we'll come back to Jody.
Good evening. Thank you to WCTV for putting on this event this evening. My name is Suzanne Ryan. I'm Vice Chairman of the Zoning Board of Adjustments. I've been a member since 2008, both appointed and elected. I've worked on 2 town master plans. Recently, the one I worked on was future land use and natural resources, and I'm also a member of the CIP, Capital Improvements Program. I've attended dozens of lectures and seminars, and I always walk away with something new that I didn't know. Previously to moving here, I was a longtime member of a planning board, maybe about 30 years, in a small border town to Massachusetts. Some of you, or some people may say that the zoning board is a board of no. However, on average, that is not correct. The bigger cases, such as the one we recently had on the Bridge Falls Path area this year, received a denial, but it also received a lot of attention, and that was the only case that was denied last year. I voted no for that one. There were 9 cases before us, 1 denial, 6 approvals, 1 dismissed, and 1 withdrawn. And if you'd like more information on those cases, page 133 in your town report. So let's talk about zoning boards and building code board of adjustments. The ZBA authority is granted by the state of New Hampshire in their laws called RSAs, and is limited as to what relief from town zoning we can grant. Our powers are derived strictly from the statutes. Here are some of the examples. We hear and decide appeals of errors made by administrative officials. We authorize an appeal from the town zoning ordinances for a variance from specific zoning ordinances, and only if the 5 criteria I read to you all are met. If one of the 5 are not met, we must deny. So the 5 criteria in abbreviated form are: 1, not contrary to public interest; 2, the spirit of the town ordinance is met; justice is done; values of surrounding properties not diminished; and the 5th one is literal enforcement would result in a hardship to not the person, the land. And whose interests do we serve? The zoning board members must be unbiased for each application. You may think some zoning ordinance provision is entirely ridiculous and even contrary to the public interest, but we cannot act on our feelings. We must refer to the purpose of the application, the town ordinance section. The ZBA represents the public interest as actually embodied in the zoning ordinance. The overall integrity of our zoning ordinance is an invisible party in every case we hear. Part of our function is to protect that interest the people voted in. I used to feel spending was the most important thing to be informed about, but not necessarily so. Voters need to try and inform themselves of what to vote in per the planner and the building board's annual proposals. Good planning has its rewards, preserves land, water, and character of a community. Ill-conceived planning and development, if passed, is almost irreversible, and the ZBA's relief through variances cannot fix it. Once it's done, it's done.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Jody, you're also running for the ZBA. Do you want to weigh in on why you're running for the ZBA?
I'm running for a seat on the ZBA because I just really want to get more involved with things in the town, and I think the ZBA is a good spot to maybe get in and help make the right decisions on, like Suzanne was just talking about, all the zoning and the criteria to be with it. That's about it.
All right. Audrey Klein, who's the current chair of the ZBA, could not be here this evening. She wanted me to read just a couple of paragraphs about herself. She says, "Hello, I'm Audrey Klein. I'm an incumbent candidate for the Wolfeboro Zoning Board of Adjustment. I am currently serving my first term, and I really love zoning, which seeks to find a balance between personal property rights and the public good, and is a legal framework by which we implement the long-term community goals described in the master plan. I believe that local zoning ordinances should be living documents that serve the changing vision of the community. Wolfeboro ZBA has had an interesting and fruitful year with a variety and impact of the cases brought before us in 2022. Of the 12 cases heard, there were 8 approvals, 2 denials, 1 case withdrawn, and 1 case dismissed. As a youth, I visited family friends regularly at Bear Camp Pond and later married and started a family in Sandwich. After enrolling in the architectural engineering program at New Hampshire Tech in Concord, I moved to Wolfeboro, and upon graduating in 1993, I became self-employed and designed over 50 houses in the Wolfeboro area. Presently, I'm the code administrator in Durham, and with 15 years of public experience in planning, zoning, and building departments. I have unmatched experience and perspective to bring to the Board of Adjustment, and I ask for your vote on March 14th. We'll move on to the Planning Board. Roger.
My name is Roger Murray, and I'm a candidate for the 3-year term on the Wolfeboro Planning Board. Growing up, I spent at least part of every summer of my life in Wolfeboro, and after I graduated from college, I came up for the summer and never left. I met my wife Linda here, we raised our children here, and we're very fortunate to have not only our 3 children, but 5 grandchildren living in Wolfeboro. I first became involved in land use and zoning as a member of the Wolfeboro Planning Board from 1973 to 1980. Eventually, I became vice chair of the board and then chair, and in those capacities, I talked to the town attorney regarding issues before the board. And I found this very interesting, and it influenced my decision to attend law school. After law school, I worked for a local law firm and then opened my own office in Wolfeboro, which I operated for 40 years until I retired in 2010. My practice involved real estate, zoning, and I represented a local planning board. I also represented clients before the Wolfeboro Planning Board and the Wolfeboro Board of Adjustment. While doing that, I did stay involved with planning, served on multiple master plan committees, parking committees, shorefront committee, attended many, many public hearings on proposed zoning amendments. I'm presently on the Route 28 Study Committee and the Charette Implementation Committee, and I've been a longtime representative for the town to the Lakes Region Planning Commission. I was on the board of the Friends of the Wolfeboro Town Hall, and I'm presently on the board of the Wolfeboro Public Library Foundation.
Thank you, Roger. Peter, you're up.
I started coming to Wolfeboro when I met my present wife, and so therefore I've been coming to Wolfeboro in the summers at least for about 40 years now. Upon retirement, moved to Wolfeboro, and that was about 13, 14 years ago. So I know the town, I've been here, I've seen changes. I have literally seen the steam engine going on the rail trail, which we now have. I've served two terms on the planning board and would like to serve another term. I was chair of the Natural Resources Committee for the Master Plan, and in that particular role, helped to devise what we ended up producing to try to preserve the natural resources of our town, which are very, very important. I am actually the person who seems to be responsible for analyzing what parts of the master plan have been accomplished and which ones still need work. The wonderful thing about that is that many of the things which have been done, well over 40%, are completely accomplished, and then there's another 30 or so percent that are in active work forward. There are a few which haven't been followed through on because the voters voted down expanding the docks last year, so we didn't do that. However, the select board ended up basically making it so that there were dock masters out there so that they could put more boats in. I have a science background, and I think that helps me to ask questions to help define the issues. There's sometimes when it seems as if there are reasons which need to be brought up that are good or bad to either approve or disapprove a particular application. The real purpose on the planning board is to find appropriate solutions that balance between protecting the environment and the landowner's rights. Landowners do have rights. They're supposed to. It's their land. However, the neighborhood and the neighbors and the town of Wolfeboro also have rights to clean water and other things which are important to them. The town depends on our lakes for tourism, and the townspeople enjoy them too, as in this is maybe one of the reasons why you live in Wolfeboro. We need to protect those water resources. We need to protect our town and the way it looks. And part of what Planning Board has done recently is to put up architectural standards so that we don't have some neon building built in downtown. That to me is important. We're also working on trying to deal with the idea that we need to protect our resources, but we also need to have places for the workers who provide the services to our economy, places to live. I enjoy the discussions that occur at the Planning Board, and I believe that I've put in my part in the past and have made Wolfeboro a better place to live, and I would like to do so in the future.
Thank you, Peter. Steve, you're up.
Hello, my name is Steve Pecci. I'm running for Planning Board. I've lived in Wolfeboro 30-plus years. Before we moved up here, we used to come up here in summer over on Pipe and Rock. My family loved it so much, we moved up here. I'm a graduate of Brewster. I'm also currently working for the Highway Department for the last 5 years. Also, I have 16-plus years in the fire service. 8 of those have been as full-time. The last 3 years, it's been weird. I've been finding myself watching planning board meetings at home, always wondering, what it was about, wanting to be part of it. I feel that it's time for a change. I think I'd be a good asset to the town. I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot. I've been asking questions the last 2 months. I'm realizing that there's a lot to it. I know I'm new to this, but I think it's time to take that next step. Wolfeboro in the last, 5-6 years has grown dramatically, and I think it's time to take that next step. I also think that we're not, a major city, but I also think that it's time to make that next step, and then that's it. Thank
All right,
you.
thanks, Brody.
Yeah,
I'm the
I'll try to-
library trustee.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Wolfeboro Community Television and especially the Executive Director, Timothy Goodwin, moderator, Randy Parker, and Randy Walker, I'm sorry, not Randy Parker, and the public for watching tonight. I'm going to time myself to make sure I go quick. So I was your former state rep, one term from 2020 to 2022. As your state rep, I served on the State and Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. I was also clerk of the Carroll County delegation, which kind of operates like our budget committee. After that, I was elected to the Governor Wentworth Regional School Board as an at-large member in 2022. I serve on the Finance and the Building and Maintenance Committees. As a state rep, I also served on the New Hampshire Department of Safety's Ad Hoc Committee on Firefighter and EMS Recruitment and Retention, where we developed a plan for recruiting EMS and firefighters from across the country to move to New Hampshire, to work in New Hampshire, and to convince more young people and people trying to change careers to join the profession. When I'm not in the ballot, I've served as a ballot clerk, volunteering to help make sure our town's elections operate. Back in January of this year, I was appointed to fulfill the rest of a open library trustees board seat, and I serve as the treasurer of the library board of trustees, which makes me the chair of the finance committee, the chair of the policies and procedure committee, and I also serve on the ad hoc search committee for a new library director. I am not Brian DeShays, the Board of Selectmen. That's my father. We're two different people. People get us confused, just to clarify for anyone watching at home or who will watch this later. He's a good guy, though, for the most part. My biggest goal as a library trustee is to continue producing fiscally responsible budgets, support our staff who do an amazing job supporting the community and the services provided, promote good policies so the library can operate properly and for the public good, and to oppose any book bans because people in this town and country deserve free and fair access to information. I don't think it's the government's job to determine what information they are ingesting. And other than that, if you're wondering why there's a mark on my head, it's because I went to Ash Wednesday Mass before this. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brody. And Brody is running Two people are running for 2 slots, so we predict victory in his case. Another person that's running uncontested for a library trustee position is Steve Farley. He could not be here this evening. He wanted me to just read a couple of paragraphs. He says, "Here is the brief reason I want to be trustee for the Wolfeboro Public Library. I grew up as part of a large family in a rough and tumble neighborhood in the great state of New Jersey. Stop snickering, New Jersey has its moments. College was a foreign concept. However, due to my mother's contagious passion for reading that was fueled by our local library, a thirst for knowledge and learning was planted in her 5 children. Somehow, all 5 of us borrowed, scraped, and worked our way through university and graduate degrees. We all agree to this day that our local public library was a key catalyst for our ongoing dream to learn. My wife's family had been a part of Wolfeboro since World War II, and I've had the privilege of living here for over 20 years. Wolfeboro is a special place exemplified by its beautiful library and the wonderful people that work there. In the spirit of my mom and to support our great library, I'm on the ballot to continue as a Wolfeboro Public Trustee." And thank you, Steve, and we'll go on to Steve Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Steve Wood. I am the incumbent running for a 3-year term on the Wolfeboro Police Commission, currently finishing my 15th year on the commission, served the last 7 years as its chair. I was born here in Wolfeboro in 1959, quite interestingly, the same year that the New Hampshire House voted to adopt House Bill 420, which led to the creation of the Wolfeboro Police Commission. My wife has lived here all of her adult life, and we've raised our 2 daughters here. We're very blessed to have both daughters and their families close by. We have 6 grandchildren, 3 of which are currently in the school system. Next year, 5 will be. So obviously, I'm very, very impassioned about school safety. You've probably heard me speak about that with our commission initiative to add an additional SRO. My belief and my purpose for being on the commission is that it's paramount that we have public safety in our community. Our community not only includes our citizens, but our visitors, and also the people that attend, the students and staff that are in our schools every day within the town of Wolfeboro. 2 of those schools are regional, and the other 2 are basically town schools, but part of the district. The commission is very committed, as I said, to public safety, and we've asserted ourselves sometimes when we've had to. We felt we've had to. We had a horrific event occur in Wolfeboro in 2018. I'm not going to get into the details, but events of that magnitude will rise to a level where outside agencies take over the case. When you're into day 2 following something like that, and the town still doesn't know that they're safe to move about and not worry about their safety, we see that as a problem. So we said from now on, we're not going to interfere with cases that rise up to the county level, the state level, but as soon as we know that our community is safe, we're going to let our citizens know that they are safe. We feel you have that right. We are also committed to hiring the best possible officers that fit our community policing policies here or practices here in town. We want our officers to be professional but also approachable and to serve and protect you in the best possible way. We're committed to staffing the department with the best staff that we can possibly get and resource them accordingly within the confines of our budget. We are your liaison to the police department, and what I mean by that is if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, or anything, we avail ourselves to you. Please feel free to reach out and ask or suggest, and we will listen, and we will take that and move forward with it. Other than that, I'm going to be brief this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And now on to the Budget Committee. We have 4 people running for 3 slots. And John, why don't you start us off?
Good evening, everyone. My name is John McDonald, and I won't tell you what year I was born, but I've been a resident of Wolfeboro for 63 years. So it's been a big part of my life. I've seen many changes over the years. Many of the things that we're paying for now, my mom and dad paid for 50 years ago. I can remember when they built the police and fire station, when the fire department was down here where the community center was, the police station was here, the library was back here. All these things have to be replaced. So I've been a big supporter of maintaining our buildings and also our roads. I've been on the budget committee, I think, for about 35 years. I started when I first got married. I wanted to give back to the community because that's the way I was raised. The budget committee is nonpartisan. There's no Republicans and Democrats. We all try to work together, and we try to resolve the issues or the problems that the town is facing. We try to balance it out so not one particular group gets all the money, and there may be certain needs that the fire department needs by documenting it, so we provide them with additional personnel. Parks and Rec is the same way. One of the things I just learned down to Concord is New Hampshire is the second oldest state, oldest, the people are getting older in the United States. Maine is number one. What county do you think is number one in New Hampshire for an older population? Carroll County. Carroll County. So that's a lot of things. We may be going in a different direction. There may be things that, as we get older, that we may need, like the community center or some type of activities like that, where we stop focusing from all the baseball fields to do something else for the older population. But that's a call that the selectmen will have to make. Over the past 35 years, I hope I've contributed something to the community. I think it's a pretty good place to live. I raised all my kids here. My mom was born here back in the, oh boy, I won't give her age, but quite a while ago.
1800s.
Oh, Randy, you can be so hurtful sometimes. She is trying to achieve getting the cane for the oldest person in town. Hopefully she'll achieve that goal. But anyhow, I think I'm a very approachable person. I try to work with the department heads and the Board of Selectmen, and I'd ask for your vote so that I can continue in that function for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Hey, Brian?
Good evening. My name is Brian Black. To many of you, I'm still better known as Nancy Black's husband. We have lived in town for the past 43 years. Starting in 1980, I began employed by the Wolfeboro Police Department. I was a member of the department for 26 years, retiring in 2006 as chief. During that time, I learned the department had a perspective of department budgeting, which I found very useful. And since retiring and working in the private sector, I currently work at a local business, Goodhue Bow Company, that depends strongly on tourism in Wolfeboro. And it's given me that perspective as well. I've been on the budget committee for the past 15 years and would like to continue on the budget committee. I believe my perspective and my experiences in life have, and my experience on the committee has given me a good perspective of how I evaluate my opinions and cast my votes in the committee. I've enjoyed working with the committee. We've had some diverse opinions throughout, and the debate has been healthy and amongst us. And I think we try to work our best to present a fair and not too extravagant budget. Over the past years since I've been here, we've seen a lot of major projects. Many of these projects have required both a private and public partnership. That's how many of these projects can get funded and moved forward through that private-public partnership. Our town infrastructure is we're still working to catch up on some of the sewer and water issues and the water infiltration and leakage throughout. So the Public Works Department continues to address these major issues, and we all work towards getting the town in a situation where perhaps our children and grandchildren might not have to suffer quite as much. But I did a little research looking back to 2008 when I started on the Budget Committee. Our tax rate was $10.62 per thousand. And of course, our tax rate is what we work towards, keeping our tax rate down. Of course, there's always some there's the occasional property reevaluations over the time, but currently we're at a tax rate of $13.67. So over that time period, I think we've still done a very good job at trying to keep the operating budget of the town within reason. I do appreciate the fact that many of the major projects are now placed in a warrant article, which gives voters the opportunity to vote up or vote down on many of these things rather than having them incorporated into the operating budget. I just would appreciate your consideration at the polls, and I'd like to continue my my work on the Budget Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Paul?
Good evening. Is this working? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good, thanks. Good evening, and thank you very much to Wolfeboro Community TV, Brad, and everybody, Brandy, for putting this meeting together. I can't speak for the people to my left, but it sounds like I'm the rookie resident of the town. I've only lived here 14 years. But when I came here at the recommendation of a doctor who practiced medicine at Huggins, probably 50 years ago. And then he went on to figure out how to cure diabetic retinopathy. He became a Harvard professor, and to this day, he's a pretty famous guy. What he did is he described this town to me in such a way that when I drove down Main Street, I was actually thinking that I was looking through his eyes. It was exactly what he described. I fell in love with the place, and I decided that this would be a great way to give service. Like I think all of us have done here, we talk about giving service back to the town. When I came here, I had the good fortune of joining the Wright Museum Board. I became a professor up at Plymouth State. I briefly served on the Economic Development Committee. I joined the Planning Board and spent a couple of years learning about land use, which was a blast. Most of the time it was. I joined the Board of Selectmen. I decided to not run for re-election a few years ago because I knew I was going to be out of town, and I couldn't do the job that is required to be a servant in this town. And so I stepped aside, but now I'm back. And I'm glad to be back. During my time as a selectman, I focused on things that I thought were important to the town, and that is keeping the town safe, clean, and family-friendly, and working on things that are big and expensive to our taxpayers, and that is energy, internet, water quality, and so you'll find my name alongside of other people's names on the committees that I served on. I believe that this town has kind of reached a tipping point, a bit of a change. This year, and maybe it was last year, but this year, if we add up the amount of operating expense, capital expense, and monies we are going to appropriate to the school board, and if the warrant articles pass, if they pass, we're going to ask voters in this town to appropriate about $50 million. That's about $1 million a week that is going to go in and out of this town. At that level of spending, at that level of appropriation, things get complicated. And I think it's extremely important that we make sure that we do something that Mr. Bowers, our former selectman and colleague of mine on the board, do. And he said, no matter what you do, always work together in harness, meaning always pull in the same direction. And that means that we get focused on roles and responsibilities. That means that we make sure that we're connected, and I'm stealing the word from somebody who used it earlier this evening. You've got to be connected to what's going on in the town. You have to. Because there's a lot of things that go on during the year. Planning board issues, budget committee issues, Wolfeboro Waters issues, things that have to do with capital improvement, all of these teams that I've sat on as well, but as a Board of Selectmen member. If you don't have context with what's going on, you cannot make a recommendation as to what to do. And that's a personal opinion. I reserve the right to be wrong, but that's how I believe that you give service back to the town. And so my focus on running for the Budget Committee is really to ensure that we refresh ourselves. We figure out clearly what the remit was when the voters voted in a Budget Committee. For those of us who may or may not know this, the state does not require a town to have a Budget Committee. You're required to have a planning board, and you're required to have a Board of Selectmen. The voters of this town said, no, we want one of those things called a Budget Committee because we want a second perspective. And I think it's important that we sit together and refresh ourselves as to how we deliver on that perspective. So I hope you'll vote for me. I look forward to answering questions tonight to kind of share my perspectives on how we could do things maybe a little differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Steve?
Hi, my name is Steve Johnson, longtime resident of Wolfeboro. First off, I'd like to thank you in the audience, the voters, and I'd like to thank the people watching, because without you, it becomes a less involved process. And the process of expenditures and appropriations, et cetera, is very, very important. I've been on the Budget Committee a number of years now, and I can tell you that participation by the voters is extremely important. We love to hear your feedback. We love to get your opinions on different things from a budget perspective. Is it something that's going to be good? Is it something we can put off for another year, or is it something we need to do immediately? So thank you, voters, for listening tonight. When I registered to vote, registered to be a candidate again for Budget Committee, my wife Gail said, "What did you do that for?" I can honestly tell you she may or may not vote for me. But I did decide to do it again. I think it's very important to do. Again, the process is important. It's a check and balance. To Paul's comment about a Budget Committee, it's not required. The town of Wolfeboro wanted it. So I think that it's a very, very important part of the process to be a check, because it's easy to spend someone else's money. My perspective on the Budget Committee is, I kind of put it as how I would operate my household expenditures. If it's something that I need to do right away, like a failed system of some kind, spend the money and get it done. If it's something I can put off, if it's a kind of a wish or somewhat of a want as opposed to a necessary thing to do, that's the principle that I would apply. Also, having been on the Budget Committee for a number of years now, you start to get an idea of how the process works, how to better articulate your questions. To Paul's comment about understanding, what's involved, very, very important. One of the members of the Budget Committee, Bob Tuffer, who is watching, I'm sure, I pick his brains all the time because he's been on the Budget Committee for, I think, as long as John has almost, and how he brings things to the table that help me understand as far as like what Wolfeboro can afford and what may be a bad decision. About the tax rates are probably going to go up in next year, but we've also got a reval coming in next year also. And with that reevaluation, that will actually potentially lower the tax rate because we're blessed with Lake Winnipesaukee, Lake Wentworth, Crescent Lake, Mirror Lake, that are high property values. And so thank you for those high property values, because if we didn't have that base, it would be a different financial situation that we might have in Wolfeboro. So I think rather than go down my life history, I'll just tell you, I love Wolfeboro. I was born in June, came up here in July, and so been here since a baby, and it's just a great place to raise a family. Love to be on the lake, love to ski, and love to walk to downtown Wolfeboro. So thank you for your support, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
Thank you, Steve. And before we move on to Tom, I do want to recognize one person who's running also for the Budget Committee, but for the 1 year unopposed position, Bobby Budman. And she graciously agreed to not participate, to give more time for the candidates up front. So thank you for that, and just wanted to give you a shout out. So Tom, you're up on the school board.
Okay, thank you, Randy. I'm Tom Bickford, and I'm running unopposed for the 3-year at-large position on the Governor Wentworth Regional School District.
A little closer to the microphone, Tom.
Oh, okay.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought this was going to be faster, but I'll have to repeat. I'm Tom Bickford, and I'm running unopposed with a 3-year at-large position on our Governor Wentworth Regional School District School Board. I have already been serving on the school board since August 2023, when the board members chose me to finish out the term of a former member. During these past months on the board, I have learned of the responsibilities and experienced the many frustrations of being a school board member. And yet, despite the frustrations, I still hope you will elect me to a 3-year term. In regards to my connections to the school district, I grew up in New Durham and have lived in Wolfeboro for over 20 years. Like most local families, all of the Bickfords went to Kingswood from the 1960s right up to the graduation of my daughter this year. My work experience includes my first career as a firefighter EMT, after which I attended law school and practiced law in both Connecticut and New York before coming to Wolfeboro. But the most important connection I have to the school district is my daughter being in high school, which helps me to relate to other parents and gives me insight into how the school board's policies affect students on a day-to-day basis. As a school board member, I will work with the other board members on the following: deciding which expenses are wants and which expenses are needs, so that we can use the fewest tax dollars possible to give our students an excellent education, improving the well-being and safety of our students and staff, improving standardized test scores to at least the pre-COVID levels, and increasing transparency and communication with parents and residents. In conclusion, a good education is critical to our graduates' ability to compete either in the job market or in college. And well-educated graduates are also critical to keeping our nation at the top of today's global economy. I hope that you agree with me and that you will vote for me in March. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mary?
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Walker, Wolfeboro Community Television, people at home, folks in the audience. When I introduce myself, the Schilleref name, I often get that sounds familiar look, and I explain, well, I'm Ruth's daughter, and then I get that, oh, and sometimes I get, how's Milo? So I do want to say right now, hi, Mom, and happy 100th birthday on March 3rd. Thank you. I'm pleased, and I know she's happy about that. I am pleased to share why I'm running for this at-large seat on the Governor Wentworth Regional School District School Board. I'm running because my roots are here. My extended family has been here since the 20s, the 1920s. Because of my father's work, we moved about every 4 years, but always, always we were back in Wolfeboro with our grandparents for the summer. My 3 brothers and parents settled here permanently in the 70s, and when I retired from teaching, I moved back home. I'm running because of my experience as a public school teacher in Asheville, North Carolina. My undergraduate degree is in sociology, and my licensure is grades 4 through 9, as well as academically and intellectually gifted education, K-12. I do have a master's degree. Most of my 30-year career, I taught 5th grade. One of my former students recently suggested my campaign slogan should be teachers and students first, above all else. 5th grade is the best. Where can you have amazing lessons like how to extract the class crayfish from the bathroom sink drain? Why you call in one of the custodians who cleverly and resourcefully bends a metal coat hanger into tongs. You see, in a school, everyone is a teacher, everyone. So thank you, Mr. James. My tenure with Asheville City Public Schools included a math, science, and technology school, a year-round school, and a NASA Explorer School. I completed my career as the academically and intellectually gifted education coordinator, K-12 for the district. I could say a lot more about that, but I'll just pass that on for questions, perhaps. Through the NASA Explorer School program, we were able to connect with numerous NASA engineers. We engaged in real-world inquiry-based learning and the application of these skills in careers. We emphasized the 30,000-plus spin-off technologies, such as medicine, robotics, 3D food printers. Look that one up. That's pretty fascinating. Freeze-dried food, firefighting equipment, micro-machining, miniaturized vacuum pumps, and cochlear implants. Content is important, but process skills are portable. Process skills apply everywhere. We observe, communicate, predict, measure, form questions, and extract crayfish from drains. This reminds me also of my lesson in thermodynamics, specifically climate versus weather. And there's teachers out there that this has happened to. When we came back one Monday to the poorly regulated school heating system, meaning too hot, there were hundreds of hatching praying mantises hanging on the walls like translucent tinsel. Imagine the problem-solving, cooperation, and communication there. I volunteer now with the Carroll County Coalition of Public Health. This partnership among families, business, law enforcement, safety, health, and medical, these are extraordinary people. As a school board member, I would enthusiastically support the expansion of the Lakes Region Technology Center to build on their capacity and community collaboration. I'm also running because we need more labs. Labrador retrievers. That is. And of course, golden retrievers. As a former volunteer puppy raiser with Assistance Canine Training Services, I learned how impactful the presence of a facility dog can be in schools when paired with professionals providing animal-assisted therapies. Because see, sometimes we don't need advice. Sometimes all we need is a hand to hold, an ear to listen, and a heart that understands. Sometimes all we need is a dog. A year ago, I studied and passed the exam to become a ham radio operator. It was a life goal. Ham radio brings people, electronics, and communication together. I've met some very cool people from all walks of life. It's fun, social, educational, and can be a lifeline during times of need. Even recently, that happened. So, fun fact, software created with NASA expertise is improving satellite-based search and rescue systems. Maybe you heard about the recent rescues because of ham radio. In closing, I'll say I take seriously holding principles above personalities, that the only difference between easy and hard is the time it takes to do it, and that there is dignity in all work. I'm running because there is really only one question above all others, and that's the big idea that informs school culture and empowers teachers. What do students need to know and be able to do? Thank you for your attention and your vote.
Thank you, Mary. Charlene?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Wolfeboro Community Television and Randy Walker. I want to thank our audience members present as well as our viewers. Although I'm running unopposed, I thought it was important to come out and just introduce myself to those who may not know me. I was originally elected to the school board in 1999. I served until 2017 and took some time off when my husband got sick. I'm back on the board. I just completed a three-year term, so I've been on the school board non-consecutively for 21 years. I know we're getting short on time, so I'll be brief. I've been a lifelong, passionate supporter of public education. I firmly believe that the only way we can maintain the democracy that I hope we all hold so dear is to have strong public education. We have certainly had some challenging times over the years. I would think we might all be able to agree that the most challenging time was the COVID-19 pandemic. We have, I think, done an incredibly strong, good job in trying to mitigate the delayed learning that so many of our students had experienced. It was a challenge. I think that we are on the right track to get them to where they need to be. I'd also like to say that we do need to stand against attempts to restrict our First Amendment rights. I firmly believe in all of the amendments, and if you go to our district website, you'll see that there is a community member who has filed a right to know request for a list of books that have been promulgated as being somehow harmful for our students to read. And we do have a school district policy that allows any parent who has an objection to any particular title to have their child not read that particular book. But I do know that it's very important for us to make sure that we provide the funding for our students to thrive. I'm also incredibly grateful for the number of years that our taxpayers have graciously, and I think with great confidence in the product we produce, have supported our budgets. And as I said, although I'm running unopposed, I sincerely hope that you will honor me with your vote.
Thank you, Charlene. Well, you guys did such a great job. It's almost time for conclusions and final remarks, which I had somewhat nervous about. But let me jump right in, and I'm going to bulk up a couple of questions. I'll start with the planning board. I've had a number of clients and friends say they did not understand a single warrant article this year on the planning board, Articles 2 through 10. And the question is that just the nature of the beast, or can and should there be more transparency? For example, Article 5, which is short-term rentals, says, and I quote, "Are you in favor of amending the zoning ordinance by adding the term short-term rental to establish a definition of this land use?" But what does that mean? The article doesn't explain what the definition is. So a little further checking says that the definition basically is the use of a residential property for 30 days or less. So the question, and it's twofold. One, should the amendments be more explicit, state their purpose, provide a summary? And then number two, on the substance of short-term rental, are you in favor or opposed to short-term rental? And it's my understanding that if Article 5 passes, that short-term rentals will be banned in the town of Wolfeboro. And we start off probably with Roger, you're closest, and then Peter, and then Steve.
Well, first of all, I believe that is correct. According to the town planner, if the short-term rental warrant article passes, then they will be banned in the town of Wolfeboro, except for those which are grandfathered, meaning that existed previous to the passage of that amendment. I would agree with the concern that the current amendments are very difficult to understand the way they appear on the town warrant. If you go back years, you will find them much clearer. Under the statute, you're supposed to put in a topical description of what the amendment does. I don't think that does that. There are a bunch in here which simply say changing it for clarification and planning review. They actually make some significant changes to the current zoning ordinance, and that is not at all clear. So I think, and I raised that objection at the public hearings on the zoning amendments, which I attended, but I think the planning board needs to do a better job of explaining what the amendments do. We had one public hearing where there were not copies of the amendments. And at one public hearing, I actually handed out copies that I got from the town planner because they weren't available when you came in the room.
All right, Peter?
Some of the issues associated with how the things are presented to the warrants has to do with trying to make it is short enough so it fits on the ballot, which may or may not be what we should be doing. We need to have background information so that people can really understand what's going on. So yes, I agree what shows up on the warrant could be better presented. With relationship to the short-term rental, there is one thing on the ballot dealing with short-term rentals specifically, and if that does not pass, the other warrant article associated with detached additional dwelling units has in it specifically something which talks about short-term rental. So therefore, there are two things that are being voted on which are going to be dealing with that particular issue. The idea of these detached additional dwelling units is that they are not in the waterfront district, they're not in places where they aren't appropriate, and they are also supposed to be things which are not short-term rentals. You can't have people come up for a weekend and that kind of thing. The people who live there are supposed to be on the premises and are in the other unit. And I think there is real benefit to these because some of them may be smaller and would prevent or allow workers to rent them at a reasonable rate. Or it may end up being a family who's downsizing where the parents want to remain in Wolfeboro, want to remain on the property that they've lived on for many years, so they build a smaller unit and the rest of the family can live in the old house. So yes, things should be done more clearly, but the short-term rental issue is something that the planning board worked on for long periods of time.
Thank you, Peter. Steve?
I do agree that warrant article is very confusing. Being new to this, and I have a hard time understanding it. I also believe that people should be able to do short-term rentals. I know this may cause issues, but it's your property. If you are, not here 6 months out of the year and want to rent it out, you got doctors at Huggins Hospital, other people that, are trying to get jobs up here. I think it would be beneficial for them, and that's my take on that.
All right, thank you. I'll move right along to a joint question for the Selectmen and the Budget Committee. The two biggest single warrant articles this year, Article 11 for the Public Safety Building and Article 12 was the Libby. And the Libby in particular was recommended by the Selectmen, not recommended by the Budget Committee. So could you tell us how you stand on those two articles? And keep in mind that time is getting tight. And Linda, since again you're closest, we'll work from left to right here. And then the Budget Committee will start with John after the Selectmen start.
Okay, I'll start with the Libby Museum. The Libby Museum is, in my opinion, a voter's choice. The Friends of the Libby have gone out and raised large sums of money, $2.2 million. They didn't meet their 70-30 split, but as a selectman, I felt it was important for you, the voters, to decide whether you wanted to accept a $2 million gift to take care of the Libby Museum. My concern with the Libby Museum is we do need to make sure that we can protect the exhibits. We're going to need to do something to repair it. And so I voted yes, because I thought that it should go out and that the voters should have the choice to decide whether they want it or not. I was not concerned about them not raising the 70%. They've raised 56%, and it was an agreement which there was an escape clause for both of us, so it's up to you, the voters, to decide how important the Libby Museum is to you. In terms of the public safety building, it is a $13.1 million price tag. I know that's high, but the police and fire have outgrown their space. Anybody who took the tour could absolutely see that. And so I'm voting in support of that warrant article because I think we need to upgrade that building. It was built in 1970. It's over 50 years old, and it has outlived its useful life. I know it's a big ticket item, but I think it needs to be done, so I'm in support.
Dave?
Yeah, the same thing. The Libby Museum, we own the building and the property, and it needs repair. Nothing's been done there for a good many years, and if you saw any of the pictures of it, it sits on nail kegs full of concrete. That's what's there for most of the foundation underneath. The building is shifting. It's leaning towards the lake. It needs to be stabilized, and I'm certainly in favor of that warrant article. Public safety building, agree with Linda, 13.1 million is a big chunk, but the building has outgrown its life. If you have taken the tours, as Linda said, or if you want to go up there anytime and look at it, you can see that both sides of that building, both fire and police, are very crowded. There is not enough space for both of them to be in the same building unless we rebuild it, and it's going to be done in phases. The apparatus bays will be done first, the equipment will be moved, then the apparatus bays in that area will be torn down, two-story addition put on it, and then the front section will be renovated. So I am in favor of that as well. It needs work, same as the museum does, and I think that the town has done a good job about taking care of most of their buildings, such as this one. So hopefully you will vote in favor of those two articles.
Thank you, Dave. Jody?
Yeah, I'm going to start with Article 12, the Libby Museum. I'll be voting against it. Reasons being, this was passed, we voted on this a few years ago, and the Friends of was supposed to raise their money. Taxpayers' money was put away, and they weren't able to raise their money for this project. And that was, I believe it was a $2.4 million project. Now it's morphed into a $4 million project. And I just, the other reason I have to link this just a little bit back to the Pop Whalen project that just passed. I've, myself and a lot of people in town have lost the trust in the Friends of organizations working. To give you an example, two people at the meeting stood up at the Pop Whalen and said that $2.7 million was raised and secured and had it all ready to go. But as of now, I'm hearing that the project is $500,000 short on their $2.7 million pledge. So I'm worried that the Libby Museum is going to go down the same road. I think the $2.2 million should have been raised for the Libby in the bank and not in the pledges, and the other things I think are just not materializing on these projects from what I'm finding out. So, I mean, the Friends of might be a good way to offset some of the costs, but it's not being done. The Libby was done not honestly, that whole project, and I'm afraid that the Libby Museum's going to turn into that same kind of thing, and the Libby Museum's already had a bad track record. And
so we got a no vote on Libby. How about on public safety? I'm just
want to
conscious
say
of time.
a couple more things about that Libby Museum. The reason I'm questioning that is because we need more transparency. So I'll be quick on the public safety building. I'm going to be voting no on that. This is not the time to be taking on a huge project like this with everybody in town from the COVID, has been financially, mentally, and physically beat down. I'm meeting people that can't even make ends meet right now. I think the 12.5, I'm voting no this year because I feel it's being rushed too. At the bond hearing, there was no set cost. We were told that it was 12.5. It could be more or it could be less. Well, how does something become a warrant article if it could be more or it could be less? These are some of the reasons why I'll be voting no this year. We will need a new safety building. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the timing is wrong right now.
Okay, thank you. John?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to be supporting the public safety building and Libby Museum and also the sewer extension. I want to thank the friends that the previous candidate mentioned took a kind of a bad rap. I want to thank the Friends of the Town Hall, Friends of the Library, Friends of Abenaki, and the Friends of Pop Whalen. They probably raised $10 to $15 million for town projects. We've got a fiduciary responsibility to the Libby Museum to keep that building maintained. It's all in Dr. Libby's agreement or whatever. How many know when Dr. Libby died, this town declared they closed down the whole town? How many people knew that? That's what part of the community really was. To this day, I can remember going in there, seeing the mummy's hand and the dugout canoe, and that was probably 50 years ago. But it's a big part of the community. The public safety building is needed, and also the sewer extension. What I do is I want to provide numbers to folks so they'll know when they vote how much it's going to cost. Those 3 bond and warrant articles won't come up until 2024. You won't see them on this year's tax bill. And that's going to cost you 65 cents, 65 additional cents on your tax bill per thousand. And right at the start of the 2024 budget, we're going to be $1.6 million automatically that we can't take away from the budget. So you've got to use your common sense, look to see how much your tax rate is. Every year when we do the presentation, we do a slide that shows if you have a $100,000 house, how much your taxes are in 2022 and how much they'll be in 2023. And on the budget committee, we try to be as open as possible to provide you the information so you can make intelligent decisions. We have the budget up in the library. There's a copy of the budget. Should be a copy of the budget here at the town hall. Just go in and look at it, and you'll see that we have to make tough decisions, and you've got to decide if your family can afford to pay these tax increases. It's strange because we take on a couple more roads. Someone's a private developer, we take over the roads. Down the road, guess what we're going to have to do? Buy a bigger dump truck, put on another man. All those things have expenses. And we can cut the budget, but if you want to cut it, you're not going to get the services that you've expected and you deserve over the past several years, because everything has gone up in cost. Thank you.
Brian?
I was very hesitant as to which way I was going to lean on the Libby Museum, because I do believe that there's a number of taxpayers out there that don't feel that the town should be in the museum business. After listening to their presentation, I've voted in favor of it, and I will vote for the addition, primarily to maintain that structure, which is failing and is the town's responsibility. But secondly, when the Friends of the Libby represented that if this project were to move forward, they hope that they will eventually be able to sustain the Libby on their own, which I think meets my desire that the town should not be involved in the museum business. As far as the public safety building goes, there's an established committee that has looked at many alternatives as to how to deal with the space situation. If you go on the town website, there's multiple minutes from meetings and reports from designers, just about everything that you would want to know about the public safety building is on the town website, or the proposed public safety building. I absolutely agree that the current location is probably the best for both the fire and the police department. When they proposed moving the police department up on North Main Street or out at Wolfeboro Center, there was a lot of issues in both locations. I know the committee has explored other possibilities as well, but everything seems to come back to where they're proposing to remodel the fire and police station is the best location. Its proximity to the hospital, the schools, the downtown area, the waterfront, all makes sense. I know it's a big number, absolutely. And again, I invite the public to look at the Wolfeboro website and examine how those numbers were arrived at. As you can see, there was already an increase due to construction costs, and as this project gets put out, further, I don't see the costs are going to get any less. The other issue was when we were talking about perhaps separating the police and fire, you could perhaps separate the two projects. But here, one of the reasons for the big number is we're addressing both police and fire in one shot. Also, I think our debt payment down the road goes for a considerable amount of time before we have any other needs or big nut items, so to speak. Knock on wood, hopefully that will hold true. But I do plan to vote in favor of both those items.
Thank you, Brian. Paul?
So first, the Libby. When the two words that come into my mind when I think about the Libby is donor intent. Back in the 50s, whenever it was 52, 56, the town asked you to sign up for taking over the Libby. And we did. And inside of that document was a contract. And it said, you got to maintain the facility, you got to make sure it's available, you can't close it down, you can't do that. And for those of us who've been involved in nonprofits, you know that donor intent is pretty strong stuff. You can't mess with it. So for some reason, either by design or by accident, the selectmen have decided that the Libby is going to stay in the portfolio of the town. That's a fact. They get to do that. We have people called the Friends of the Libby who've stepped forward and said, we will raise money to chip in to the repair of the Libby. Some people have said, well, we're expanding this Libby beyond its remit. Well, we're not. We're just trying to protect the assets of the Libby, and that's why it gets a little bigger, because you have to have air conditioning and heating in a little adjunct of the building. So we're faced with three choices. Choice number one, don't do anything. And we might get a phone call from somebody that says, no, you're not fulfilling against donor intent. Choice number two, pay for it ourselves and just keep it limping along. This past year, we spent $77,000 in expense on the Libby. We generated $7,000 in revenue. That doesn't sound like a good deal. But the Libby, as Dave Senecal has just said, the Libby's in, I'll use the word, rough shape. So we could just let it continue to be in rough shape. Or number three, we have somebody who says, I got a couple $100,000 or a couple of $1 million in my hand, and I took the time before coming here tonight to reach out to some of those people and said, you really seriously got that money? And they do, unless they're lying. But I don't think they are. We can always check up on people who say things like that. So I'm going to vote in favor of the Libby because I think from a point of view of the town, we have decided we're going to maintain the asset. We have donor intent. That means we have to keep this asset consistent with what the donors gave it to us. We have no objective to get that off the books. And so we'll either spend $2.5 million of town money Or we'll spend $4 million in town money. And I think it's probably, in that case, a better option to do the 2.5. One last thing, which I don't think has been written down, and I heard some comments about friends and not being, whatever. We should follow the guideline that says if something's important, you should write it down. Our good friends at the Libby are saying that they're working right now on creating an endowment, $1 million or so, and if you get 4% interest on that, you might be able to cut the operating expense of the Libby in half. So I think it's important for us to, kind of look at this thing mathematically and then say, hey, the selectmen get to decide what's a priority. This one's a priority. So from where I look at it, I support it. On the public safety building, Dave Senecal and I co-chaired, started up the Public Safety Building Committee. And we asked for volunteers to join the committee, and we were fortunate to have 2 budget committee members, Mr. Lohman and Mr. Tuffer. And they can be curmudgeon-y at times. So we said, let's get them on the committee. And we also had a former police chief, and we had a number of people from the community join the committee. We broke them up into two teams, and we said, Team A, you go figure out what the police department needs. Team B, you go figure out what the fire department needs. We went on tours. We went over to Tilton. We went down to Farmington. We looked at police stations and fire stations and all kinds of things. And what you saw on the website was something we promised each other we would do. We would make sure that you knew what was going on. We would make sure that you had documents. We would make sure that you had all different points of view on this project. And I was, when I saw the first number for the project, it was 12 million or 11.9 million. And I vividly remember using the word, that's an eye-popping number. But you know what? The building's broke. It's broken. And by the way, there's fire and safety code issues. Firefighters go out and they expose themselves to contaminants. They need to come back into the firehouse and wash off. They need to not carry that stuff into the firehouse. And so that all had to be factored into what we do. Police department. When you walk through the current police department, unfortunately, if there is a prisoner in your arm, you're walking down a very thin hall, and that represents some safety issues for the police department. The building itself functionally is falling into the ground in the back corner of the building. A lot of things need to be done. We need to bring it up to 21st century standards and codes. It is going to cost a lot of money. I'm not a big favor of delaying something that's an inevitability. The thing that I would ask if I were a budget committee member, which I will continuously ask, is if we spend that kind of money, next year how much are we going to spend to keep it alive, keep it maintained? Not capital reserve funds. We do a good job at that. But what are we going to do next year to spend money to throw a paintbrush at the building? Because if we do that, we can probably keep the building alive for about 50 years and then have to update it with codes. So I'm in support of the Libby, and I'm in support of the public safety building. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Steve. And Tim Goodwin, who's running this operation this evening, said we have another 30 minutes. So we're going to push back 30 minutes. If any of you have to go, feel free to leave. But Steve, you got 30 minutes.
No, you don't.
Well, to Paul's point as far as responsibility, apparently the town did take on the responsibility. And on the budget committee, we've seen this come before us many times in many different presentations. I was not a big advocate of it. To be honest with you, I just seemed to think it was a limited scope. But having talked to a number of people in different parts of the community, I think that it's probably something that we need to do, both from a standard of the town's responsibility to the Libby Museum. I think, again, not to keep picking on Paul, but I think he's right. It's better to spend $2 million rather than $4 million, and to work cooperatively with those folks. So yeah, I think I'll go down on the side of supporting the Libby. On the public safety building, I voted against it. I will continue to vote against it. I think this is the wrong year to do it. I think it's just a big, huge amount of money. At the deliberative session, the amount went from $12.5 million to $13.1 because of other things that they had to, that they hadn't thought about, or other things that needed to be done that they hadn't included in the figuring of the budget. So what happens along the way, too, is now the fire department, which wanted to have their hose tower, they're not going to get their hose tower. So it just seems to be one thing after another with this public safety building. I think, as I understand the design, they've got 3 cells, holding cells, one including a youth cell. Do we need it? I don't know that we've got to have a discussion about it. So, no, I'm not in favor of it, and I'm not. And now with the changes, I'm not sure whether or not the fire department is in favor of it, because they lose their tower. So on that, I would be a no. So.
All right, thank you, Steve. So we have a question for the school board members, and regards school vouchers, school choice. It's been a hot topic in the legislature. Keeping in mind that Wolfeboro has Brewster Academy right here, a private school, and in Ossipee they have the Cornerstone Christian Academy, a religious school. Should taxpayer dollars follow local students wherever they go, or should parents who choose to send their children to either private or religious schools have to pay for that? So in essence, are you in favor or opposed to school choice? What's your thoughts on that? And Tom, why don't you start us off?
Well, my thoughts are twofold. One, there's always been a number of people that do not want to have their children in the public schools. And if a public school is not living up to what a student needs, then I'm not totally opposed to them being able to go someplace else. But I am opposed to this simply opening up of the state coffers to fund this. There have to be restrictions, and it should be restricted to people that can't afford it otherwise. It shouldn't be unrestricted as it appears to be going.
Mary?
I am a public school teacher. As a school board member, I would open to thoughts of all that is new and innovative. At the same time, as a classroom teacher, a public school teacher, you don't just walk in and become a teacher. The process through which you gain your certifications and the renewals, it's rigorous. There's folks watching over you at all times. The school system itself goes through a great deal of assessment as far as accreditation. When that kind of oversight exists, then I have greater faith in the integrity of something. My personal opinion as a public school teacher is support the teachers in the public schools. As a private individual, I had a superintendent once tell me that public school isn't for everyone, which I think she was kind of making a joke in a way. So I don't want to ramble so much as to say I am 100% a public school teacher, support public education, but the more the merrier. Sometimes things like this just strengthen everyone. So I'd leave it up to the voters. That's my statement.
Charlene?
New Hampshire has a rich history of inadequately funding public education. And we all know that it has been, there have been lawsuits to try to get the state to adequately fund public education, because public education is, I believe, a bedrock of democracy, as I've stated earlier, and because of the fact that the overwhelming majority of people who have taken advantage of the education freedom accounts are not poor people. They are not people, they're not new entrants, most of them, into private or religious schools. They're families who already had their students participating in private and or religious schools. So to me has been, trying to say this in a delicate way, I think it has turned into a bit of a scam. And I will also say that, as Mary pointed out, private schools and religious schools have little to no accountability in terms of the qualifications of their teachers, in terms of student performance. They do, excuse me, they do not have to adhere to the same kind of rigorous testing. And so I believe that this establishment of the educational freedom accounts is a very thinly veiled attempt to undermine public education. And we know that there has been, in the last 20 years, an influx of particular ideology that would like to have no government, or essentially no government, in our state. And they have promulgated this attempt to siphon off, and it's been successful, to siphon off, I think the latest count was over $13 million, and originally it was supposed to be only $3 million that it was going to cost. And so I am adamantly opposed to the school voucher system.
Okay, thank you. And so now on to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. We haven't asked any questions of you. And the Zoning Board, whenever an application is presented to it, has to approve of various criteria, deny various criteria. And one of the questions comes up is how much information should be provided to the board through plans, surveys, studies, et cetera. And what's your thought process on the amount of detail that should be provided to the board before it can render a decision? Why don't we start off with Jody on that?
Well, I think you definitely got to have the right facts and right information to make the right decision. So, you know, I think the more the better. I mean, you really need to know what's going on to make the proper decision. You need to know as much information as you can get from the resident to make a proper decision at that time.
Suzanne?
More is better. Probably not from your point of view, but from mine it is.
We weren't talking about me.
The information is that we ask for currently, and hopefully we're working on our bylaws, so hopefully we'll have that nailed down and it will be more than what we've got in. But typically all that has to go to the building inspector anyway. And then if it's a commercial thing, it has to go to the planning board for site plan. They have to present all of that and more. So it's not a hardship on the applicant to provide the information for us to make an informed decision.
Thank you, and I'll follow up with another zoning board question, and then we'll go back through the list for a couple. The fact that the zoning board is now elected, which is why you're here, as opposed to appointed, has that impacted you as a sitting member of the board being elected versus appointed? And Jody, what impact, if you get elected, do you think it'll have being responsible to the voters as opposed to just being appointed? And why don't you start with that one, Suzanne?
Oh, me?
Yeah,
I thought he was
I had him start first on the last one, so I thought we'd have you start on this one.
Earlier on when I said who do we represent, or who are we speaking for? We're speaking for the voters that passed these warrant articles. They're the silent partner, so to speak. So I feel accountable to the voters, whereas before, when we were appointed, they didn't like what I do, they don't appoint me, or I don't like what they're doing, I see you later. But you can't have that attitude when you're elected. You're accountable to each and every person in this town, and you won't get their vote if you don't have that attitude.
Thank you. And Jody, how do you feel on that?
I just, I feel you really got to just take, the people, the property owner, it's their property. We can't have a free-for-all. People got to understand that. But you gotta make the proper decisions and do what is best for neighbors, environment, and all that. So that's about what I can say on that.
All right, and I'm going to go backwards again, and I'll go to the school board. The House Education Chair, Rick Ladd, was quoted in January 25, 2023, of the Manchester Union Leader saying that statewide enrollment had fallen from 210 students in 2008 down to 162 this year, or a drop of 50,000 students statewide over the last basically decade. How is that going to impact the Governor Wentworth Regional School District, and how do we address it from a teacher perspective, classroom perspective, budget perspective? And Charlene, you want to start on that, and we'll go back towards Tom?
Well, I'm going to accept what the person quoted at face value. However, in Governor Wentworth, we have seen a moderate increase in our student population, and I think that we have been, because it's not an increase in every single school. We have had some lowered enrollment figures in, I think, a couple of our elementary schools, but it has not been a significant enough change that it should affect our day-to-day. We are, as many of you have heard our Chair Jack Widmer state in our budget presentations, we're very much a people-driven entity. And if we have, a handful of students that, or if we lose a handful of students, it doesn't necessarily translate into needing fewer teachers or needing, fewer administrators. One of the things that we always try to do is I'm not on the Human Resources Committee, but we've just recently concluded some negotiations with one of our bargaining units, our teachers, and what we always try to do is make sure people understand that what our goal is to offer a competitive salary and benefits package, and whenever we do negotiate those things, we look at what surrounds us in the immediate area. I can't speak to what is happening in Manchester. It doesn't necessarily affect what we try to do here in Governor Wentworth. But, we still would very much like the federal government to fulfill the promise they made decades ago about fully funding special education. They're nowhere near doing that. And we have, many fixed fixed assets in terms of our capital investments, maintaining our buildings and whatnot. We have had challenges because of rising fuel costs, and we also are experiencing staffing shortages. And so I don't necessarily agree that whatever is happening in other school districts or other counties applies to Governor Wentworth. Did that answer the question?
It just was out there so that people can get an idea of how you feel on these subjects. But thank you, and I'll move right along to Mary.
I think what I heard being asked was, when the population, if the population has decreased, how do you respond to that? I think sometimes we forget this is the state of New Hampshire, and the state of New Hampshire is responsible for the education of its population. So it's a little tricky to get right down to the minutia. The school system I worked in used to fluctuate because of the seasons, because some of the housing for the poor families, some provided heat and the others didn't. So there was a lot of coming and going. So I think this is a state issue that needs to be looked at from that point of view. But I know that there are folks working hard all the time to respond, not just for today and tomorrow, but trends to come. I think overall the state has been growing and growing and growing. So,
and Tom?
That's mine.
I agree with just about everything Charlene said. The only thing I might add is that certainly it's in the back of my mind that the population is projected to be shrinking. We've had an uptick, as Charlene said, here, but I'm not sure that that will last or how long that will last, and maybe we'll enjoy it because people have discovered Carroll County and will be moving more here. But I think we see it in not filling vacancies right now. People have retired, their vacancy might not be filled. And it's important to note that just because a child leaves the school and goes to a private school or something, you don't get to slice off that amount of a teacher. It still takes a teacher to teach the rest of the class. So I think that we are informed, and we keep it in the back of our mind, that the population could easily continue to fall. But at the same time, we're working on it. It's at least part of my thinking. Thank you.
So on the school ballot as well as the town ballot, there's a question of whether we should have a school resource officer or a police officer in the school. We already have one. The question is, should we have two? And just going to ask if you're yes or no. We're going to go right down the line, if we can go from Charlene all the way down to Steve and then jump up to the selectman candidates. So that's a question for the school board, budget committee, and selectmen. But just yes or no, are you in favor of that? Because we're limited on time.
You're asking me for a yes or no question?
On the school
Seriously?
resource officer. I know that's difficult for you, Charlene. But with your years of experience, I know you've thought about this, and you probably know which way you're going to vote. We just want to know what that way is.
Well, I think if anyone has taken...
That was a yes or a no. So I'm going to skip you now. I'm going to skip you. I'm going to Mary. Do you want to weigh in on that?
The school board has voted to support the warrant article for a school resource officer.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
Yes.
Tom?
The school board has voted to support a second resource officer.
Okay. Steve?
The budget committee voted in a split vote to support it.
Paul?
People closest to the student voted for school board.
Your microphone would be helpful. Brian?
I'm sorry. People closest to the students voted yes on it. I say the school board gets to call that, make that call.
Brian?
After considerable thought, I did vote in favor of it.
John?
Yes.
Steve, we know you're a yes.
Yeah.
Linda?
I'm going to say yes, but I also want to say that I spent a lot of time going to the school board meetings and talking to the police commission, and from doing that, there's no question in my mind it is needed.
Dave?
Yes.
And Jody?
I am a yes on this. This is the most important warrant article to be voted on, is the safety of the children and getting ready for what's coming down the road.
All right, so we have roughly 10 minutes left, and I know we didn't get back to the planning board where we started, but I'll give everybody about 30 seconds, and literally you have to stick to the 30 seconds. And maybe just pick one issue, and for the planning board members, maybe one issue that you feel passionate about. You can just say Article X, whatever it is, I'm in favor of that because. And Charlene, if we could start with you, and we will work this way, but 30 seconds would be great. Thank you.
This is going to be much less than 30 seconds. I would like to encourage everyone to please support the warrant articles presented by the school board. There is one petition warrant article that we did not support, but we would appreciate you voting for our budget and all of our warrant articles.
Mary?
I'm going to circle back to the SRO. It was because of listening to Commissioner Wood when he clarified the process that the second officer would be selected through, and that's input from the school community and the principals.
Thank you. Tom?
My interest is in the total welfare of the students and the staff. So that's what I look at. I look at it as a total system. So expect that.
Steve?
As far as the Budget Committee is concerned, it's our fiduciary responsibility to do the best that we can as far as maintaining a budget that's affordable to the taxpayers.
Paul?
I believe the Budget Committee is charged with 4 functions. That's to prepare the budget, review expenditures, conduct public hearings, and then send the budget along to the state. I think in each one of those, there is no further specification as their roles and duties other than it is a duty to connect with town people, get input, get involved, get engaged. I think in those 4 areas, there's opportunities for us to have very honest and frank conversations about how we can help the town. I know that there are Budget Committee members who have raised that concern about maybe we should do it differently. I will join with them to help them do it differently if my voice can be heard. Thank you.
And Brian?
I think we've got a fantastic budget process. I've been on both sides of it. By the time a department budget comes before the Budget Committee, it's already gone through the town manager and through the selectmen, and had been typically they're pared down before they get to us. By the time we receive the budget, there's often very little that we need to do other than go through it with a fine-tooth comb and make cuts or additions where necessary. I think we've got a great process. I've enjoyed it. I think we've got a great composition on the board where we got some different views, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue.
John?
I guess I'll continue to work hard as I have over the past 30-plus years, trying to use common sense and trying to spend our money wisely so that we can maintain the quality of life that we currently enjoy and maybe try to improve it a little bit better. Thank you.
Steve?
I think where Wolfeboro is important to all of us as community leaders, if you will, as your elected officials representing you to the best of our ability. We all have our wish lists, what we deem necessary, what we think we need moving down the road, what have you. But the process is tried and true. It's been around for a long time. And with multiple departments seeking what they think they need, what they know they need, we put a lot on the Board of Selectmen. We put a lot, and this is collectively speaking, of course, a lot on the Budget Committee. Do we get everything we want every year? Absolutely not. That's just not fiscally possible. We understand that. But all in all, everybody works together to put forth the best budget to the voters for their consideration, for public safety and for the well-being of our folks and our community in general. And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Brody?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First, I want to ask everyone to join me in supporting the school board warrant. All the articles that the school board placed on the warrant, please do your research on the resident petition warrant articles and make up your mind. It's important to be an informed voter. Please continue supporting our library and our great staff. They do an awesome job there, perform an amazing public service. That's free to everyone who's a resident of the town of Wolfeboro who pays taxes here or lives here. And I also want to ask everyone to support the expansion of the Warmth and More Fund. There's a warrant article way down the ballot. It's either number 38 or 39. I worked with the Board of Selectmen, our welfare director, our town manager, and our public works director to make it so the town can collect under our Warmth and More Fund wood donations that can be dispersed to people who need wood assistance during the winter. It's free to the taxpayers. It helps expand that fund to be used for more purposes to help people heat in the winter. So thank you.
Linda?
Yeah, I think the most important area that we need to work at this time is protecting the water quality of our town. ponds and lakes. I think the town government and the Board of Selectmen and Wolfeboro Waters all need to work together to address stormwater runoff, failed septic systems, and road salt. This year, there are 2 warrant articles that will help us do that. Article 13 is a sewer line extension, Forest Road and Varney Road. It will install a sewer line extension and address multiple failed septic systems. Article 31 is for a water resource non-capital reserve fund, which will provide funds to engineer a design to address erosion at Albee Beach, and it will also address a runoff issue affecting Whitegate Road. I think it's important that we support the public safety building and continue upgrading the town's infrastructure. We have about 4 or 5 warrant articles. One is the water main out front here. The other one is more money to complete the sewer pump station, the annual road upgrade, and of course, we always need the operating budget to run the town offices to provide the services for all of you.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I think Paul O'Brien put it pretty good earlier. He said we need to all be connected. And I think that from what the Budget Committee, what Brian said just a minute ago too, that Board of Selectmen is pretty well connected with the Budget Committee, with all the department heads, and we stay on top of all of their needs and requirements. And we certainly thank the townspeople for their support of all of these different projects over the years. And particularly this year, the public safety building and the Libby are very important to us as a board to get that moving along. Public safety building will be a 2-year project, in case you haven't read, or you can go on the website and find all that information.
Thank you. Jody?
I would like to ask everybody, all the voters, to just, when you go into the polling station and you start voting, read the warrant articles. Read them before you box them in, because last year on the Pop Whalen, it was advertised to the public at $4.2 million in the newspapers. The whole campaign was 4.2. Last minute, it was changed to $7 million. I've met so many people that voted for that Pop Whalen at 4.2, and they can't believe it went to 7. So I guess that's the most important thing is I hope you can just get out there and vote, but read the warrant articles before you check them off. Thanks.
Suzanne?
Can you clarify the question? Are we supposed to answer just relevant to our position or in general?
So generally, we're here to have, people in the audience and people that are watching get a flavor for who you are and what you are passionate about. If you want to drift off of zoning, then drift a little bit, but you have now 20 seconds.
All right, so the planning board has 3 warrant articles. I wish I had known this question was coming. I can't tell you what numbers they are, but they determined on the 3 separate warrant articles. One was for no frontage back lots. One was to do with multifamily housing, and I can't remember the third one. But they all had special exception where they would come to the zoning board and get approval for such or not, and then go back to the planning board. Well, the planning board decided they don't want us doing that anymore, so they've taken us out of the process. So I'd say vote no on those, and I wish I knew what numbers they were. And then the Libby, it's only 800,000 new money, give or take, that we have to come up with. And I think it's the best buy in town this year that you could want. Can I just say one other thing that I was going to?
Sure. I cut the zoning board off a little bit, so go ahead, but we're down to 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, there's been the question raised about property rights. I've heard a couple of people mention that.
So jump in quickly.
What?
Go ahead. You want to comment on it?
And so the New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire Constitution, Article 3D, is very interesting, and it's entitled Society, its organization, and its purpose. And it's a quote, "When men enter into a state of society, they surrender up some of their natural rights to the society in order to ensure the protection of others, and without such an equivalent, the surrender is void." So there is a balance, and there is a purpose for zoning.
Thank you. Roger?
I attended the 2 public hearings that were held on the proposed zoning amendments, and after years of supporting zoning amendments proposed by the planning board, I do not support this year's amendments, which appear as Articles 2 through 10 on the ballot. They make sweeping changes to multiple sections of the zoning ordinance. They weaken the existing regulations. Some of them, I think, are really problematic. Right now, there's a limit on the number of units you can have in a multifamily building. That will be eliminated. The only thing that will determine the size, the number of units you can put in a multifamily building will be the lot size, basically. And when you make zoning changes, you should do it carefully, because you can always expand it, but it's very difficult, if not impossible, to roll it back.
Thank you. Peter?
As a member of the planning board who produced those, it may be that there is one there that may be questionable. He's questioning particularly the density, but all the other ones are very reasonable and I think well thought out. The planning board has to balance the rights of everyone and protect the environment as well. A recent case had to do with wetland impact and a failed septic system. Things are never as simple as you'd like them to be, and when you're on the planning board, you realize that.
Steve?
I think the voters are going to be educated. I do agree that people need to take their time reading each warrant article and correct. You know, things don't always seem what they are, and hopefully I can get your vote and good weather on March 14th.
All right, thank you. So thank you all for coming and participating. I know I learned a lot, and you know, we really do live in a wonderful town, and I think that all of you epitomize why we live here and enjoy living here, and why so many tourists enjoy coming to visit. And Charlene, what are you doing? Thank you all for coming. If you want to talk to Charlene afterwards, you may.
Okay.